Hello, welcome to our webinar. Today, we're going to be talking about our Meisterplan roadmap, the latest and the greatest. Before we begin, let's go over a few notes. And this webinar will be recorded, and the recording will be sent to you in a follow-up email. All participants will be muted during the webinar, but we will have a Q&A session. There you can use the raise your hand feature and we can unmute you and you can ask your question, or you can type your question in the questions panel. As I mentioned before, we have new reaction buttons. We're happy to see what you like and what you don't like. Or maybe not what you don't like. Don't give us the thumbs down. We don't want to see that. No, just kidding. But okay, and then we also will have a post-webinar survey that you guys can take, and we would love to have your feedback. All right, let's get started. My name is Caroline Holitsky, and I'm the Director of Product Marketing here at Meisterplan. I'm here with my colleague Debbie Somerville, and she is the Director of Customer Success and will be co-presenting with me today. Our agenda for today will start off with a deep dive topic on financials. From there, we'll go to our functional enhancements that have been added to Meisterplan in recent months, and then we'll talk about our product roadmap. And like I mentioned before, we'll have a Q&A session. Okay, let's get started. I'll hand over to Debbie now.
Thanks, Caroline. All right, so the deep dive on the finance area. Basically, the vast majority, well, if not all, companies have more resource demands than they do for availability of getting those projects done. This, of course, applies to financial demands. This results in needing a good way to do portfolio planning. So this deep dive will walk you through current features for budget planning and control at both the project level and the portfolio level. I will also walk through a typical planning cycle. So whether yours is annual or quarterly, it could look very similar. It's just a different time period. First, there are features that we have had in the financial area already. These are the ability to set budgets for operating and investment costs at the portfolio level and to plan project costs against them. Costs can result from those so-called financial events or the planned workload that you have on against your project using the hourly rate. I will show you that in the demo. The software has been developed and continuously evolving over the years. So new functions have been added like splitting CapEx budget from OpEx, entering actual cost at an individual project level, and the possibility to evaluate more of these financial during the reporting. All right, I expected a little reactions there, guys, but that's all right. I'll keep going. So what's coming? There are some really exciting things coming in the areas of financials. One is a portfolio dashboard that is currently being in the requirements phase now. So it's not yet out, but it's being discussed with customers as we speak. And portfolio budgets being more accessible in the reporting capability. All right. So to explain some of the functionalities I'm going to go through during the demo, I just thought I would start with kind of how it evolves both at a portfolio level and at a project level. So early in the planning cycle, the portfolio gets a determined amount of budget. Now, portfolio in this sense, think of it as a department's budget or a value stream budget. Okay, so you can have many portfolios within Meisterplan, each one having a different budget, yearly or quarterly budget. What then happens is you go through your planning phase of selecting certain projects to include in that portfolio. This is this quarterly or annual cycle that you're going through, and we know that budget may not be exactly what you need, and that's why during this time period you're adapting the budget at a portfolio level or really figuring out if those projects need the entire scope or negotiating what could be done in order to align a more predictable starting point. Eventually, budgets that are locked in on those projects and approved to be worked in the portfolio. During the course of the project, project managers will have the responsibility of project controlling and status reporting. I will show you that within Meisterplan on options you can do there. And then, of course, at the same time, the portfolio level must be possible to check against those initial budgets. And if any changes were occurring, as we know, change requests come through and at a project level get approved. Well, what's the reality of how that affects you at a portfolio level? So in the best case, budget reallocations may be needed based on what you're seeing the reality to be. And during the demo, I'll show you how you can see that. What I would also like to make sure I demo for you are the questions that typically get asked either at a portfolio or project level. One of those questions is, which projects fit into the portfolio budget, and how do I see that to make decisions? The second comes from a project manager's perspective. Is my project within the budget, or does it need to be readjusted based on what I see happening with scope? And again, from the PMO's perspective, is my portfolio within the budget, but what does it mean for forecasting of what that spend looks like for my fiscal year? All right, so let's take a look at how to answer some of these questions within Meisterplan. All right, I know it's going to be a little boring to start with, but I like to kind of build up here on how all of these things come together from a financial side. So the Meisterplan system administrators would be in this area. So for those that are not administrators, just take a quick peek, but you don't need to really learn anything. First and foremost is user groups have security for what groups are allowed to access financial data, and that includes any of the reporting data that is financially related. The other security is the ability to add, change, and delete planned financial events. Those two are the first security areas that you need to know about. The third is project field rights. So there are options by user group to say who has the right to read a certain field, not see at all, which goes into unassigned, or edit a certain field. So you would arrange these based on who you want to edit, who you want to allow to see if they have financial rights, and if you want a group to not see certain fields, just put them in the unassigned. All right. The second thing that is something during onboarding that you get set up and probably never look at again is the primary currencies, and your start of the fiscal year can be set here. The other things set up usually during onboarding, but can be changed maybe if you start having some additional needs here, are your financial categories. This is used when adding financial events. They would contain both your cost related categories and your benefits. You can rearrange these based on how you want them to show in your dropdown. The third thing to cover here is the resource pool. On a role level, you can add a cost per hour per role, which if you have resources that don't have a cost per hour added to them, this will be used for the default. At a resource level, which is your first tab, you would be able to add a cost per hour even at a resource level, which then overrides the role level. Now, one thing to just keep in mind is if you're using these financial features that I will show you for um, financial forecasting, what you're actually going to spend, then you're not, then don't put costs on internal labor rates. If, though, instead you really want to use all the features for more of that project costing, then internal labor rates can be added for that reason. Okay. The fourth thing I would like to show you is portfolio views. Now, this is in a new spot for those that may not have seen it yet. It's in your manage area. Portfolios have historically been set up for one of two reasons. One is to, similar to StageGate Active, just pre-filter a list of projects that are very typical for everybody to use, or filter a group of resources that someone is authorized to actually see. The second reason to use portfolio filters is the reason I'll use today. You can set up department budgets or value stream budgets by adding a portfolio, and then think of it as which department is trying to manage a bucket of money or which value stream has a bucket of money. And you can add that budget, and this is called a portfolio budget, at a year level, quarter level, monthly level. Okay. You can then indicate which projects will fall within this budget. And so the filters can be added on usually some custom field for indicating the value stream or indicating the department. Maybe it's an OBS you're using. Maybe it's, in this case, I'm using a department OBS. I could have used a value stream OBS. I could have done a lookup field. Okay. That is then saying when I'm analyzing this portfolio in terms of budget planning, take into account just this group of projects. All right. The other thing to point out while I'm here, for those administrators that have been asking for, can I set up portfolios by user groups? The answer is finally yes. So very exciting here. I better see some show of emotion that you like that for those administrators on the call. A simple thing was very painful, I know, for some of you guys with larger portfolios. All right, the other thing to show is the quick import. Financials, in many cases, are in a different system, right? At least the actuals. They're in a financial system, and oftentimes you're able to connect the systems either through an integration, or you could export data from that system and import it into Meisterplan. If you're having troubles figuring out what's the best option, please give us a call and we can help consult on that. All right, so that's all the setup. Now let's get into the fun stuff. Let's go into the project list first. So the project list, and I'm looking at the portfolio budget here for software engineering. So that's the same one I set up the portfolio budget for. The project list itself has many columns that can be added, and we've gone through this before, but just so you can again see it, you can add the cost fields, the budget fields, the deviation fields to a list. And when, in this case, I just called that financial health, because that's usually what, as I'm looking at this list, I want to look at what's the health of, say, my financial budgets versus, in this case, maybe I have other fields for a time review. Time being maybe the baseline of what I thought that project was going to take in time and how am I tracking to that time. So we'll keep focused on financials, but I wanted to let you know you can save, as a reminder, different views for different purposes now and share them with certain user groups. So this is the first area that, as a project manager, I would be using to monitor my projects. say I was Kim Young and I could click logged in user if I'm a project manager, Kim Young. Of course, I'm not logged in as Kim Young, so I'm just going to pretend here I'm Kim Young. I can focus on my projects first, okay, and just and sort these columns, the deviation to say how far off am I from the budget. So this gives me the opportunity to address, do I have issues that need to be looked at, or how am I going to control the costs that I have on this project. Now let's go into one of the projects. GUI 2.0 development is the one I'm in. And I'll walk you through a few of those financial things we've either had in the past or are new. So I'm just going to start from the top though. So those fields that I was showing you in the user group settings on that right side, who gets to see it, who gets to edit it. I, of course, can edit these fields as a project manager. And there's a security setting that as a project manager, I can only update my projects. Approved budget is the summation of both CapEx and OpEx. So if you're going to use approved budget, it has to be the total, and you have to add it up yourself and key it in. It's likely you're not going to use approved budget and CapEx, OpEx. So I'm just going to show you where they're used, and then you make the determination where it's best suited for your environment. What's the portion of this budget that's CapEx? What's the portion that's OpEx? I won't talk about time too much, but we use approved total effort more as a baseline if you're not actually using that approved time on budget projects. So you can think of that as like a baseline of what you believed it to be true at some point. All right, where is this information used? So Financial Tracker has been out there for a few quarters for sure. It's using the approved budget that is shown up here and shows you a breakdown between future costs and past costs. Okay, that's all based on today's date, and it's based on the financial events, and I'll show you that in a moment. Cost type tracker is very similar, but it has a different lens that it splits. It's splitting between the CapEx budget that you see here and the deviation, as well as the OpEx budget and the deviation. It can further break down, like over here, between future and past. So this is, you might not need both of these trackers. For those that do have capitalized expenses, cost type trackers, the one I would lead you towards. If you just use operational expenses, you could use Financial Tracker just as well. These are the second areas as a project manager I can be leveraging to monitor my project's expenses and be able to start controlling that if the deviation is such that it's showing you you're going to need it. Where do these financials come from? Two spots. One is the financial events section. These are planned financial events. You can add financial events as you could add your benefits here, of course, but from a financial cost, you can do a CapEx or OpEx distinction here. These cannot be changed. They are what our software gives you the option to do. The category are the ones I showed you how to maintain in the advanced section. So I like to group the cost categories together and the benefit categories. And that can be sorted in whatever way you want in the advanced section. Early on in that planning cycle, it is recommended to add what you believe to be some high-level costs on a project and connect it to a milestone. Early on in planning, do not use a custom date. That can be done later once the project is active. The reason I say that is at least have a milestone and one's there by default called project start. So you can add all the costs to your project start, or if you had just a couple milestones along the path, you can spread that out to when roughly you're going to need that fund. The reason I say that is later when you're figuring out when you can do that project, the financials roll with the dates based on the Gantt chart later in Portfolio Designer. So this is pretty important to keep it kind of flowing with your planning cycle. So even if you loaded all costs at your project start and all benefits at your project finish, it at least gets you closer. You can refine it to the milestones later. The second area where costs come into play is how you've allocated time on a project, the people or roles that you've used, and did they have an hourly rate for that time. So the time are the allocations. The hourly rate is either the role rate or the resource rate overrides that. All right, so going back to project list. This would be the first area to monitor as a project manager. It can also be, if I didn't select project manager, the first area to monitor as a portfolio coordinator. I can then see everything that falls within my portfolio and get a quick sense of budgetary deviations. I am now going to go over to Portfolio Designer. This is the section that as you're getting into that quarterly or annual planning cycle, is as a PMO leader or portfolio coordinator, you're going in with the question, what can I get done this year? What can I commit to with more confidence? So what the first step you would do is create a scenario. A scenario is a playground, if you will. It's a copy of the plan of record. And when I add a scenario, I can talk about quarterly plan for quarter 4, quarter 1, whatever you're doing. You can assign the rights to who else has access to edit this plan. And I always want to compare to my current plan of record. So I created a scenario. It took a copy of my plan of record. You can, just so you know, highlight another scenario and do a copy of that scenario. So without getting too crazy on this demo, I just copied the plan of record, compared it to the plan of record, and now open that scenario. Notice at the top, which is always important for you to keep your eye on, what portfolio am I looking at? Software engineering only, because that's where my budgets are at. I'm looking at the quarter 4 scenario. That means anything I change here is not changing my plan of record. So financials are scenario specific, timing of projects are scenario specific, and milestones are scenario specific. So anything I change here in the scenario will not be in my plan of record. So going into this planning cycle, you probably have 50 things that somebody wants to see, can I commit to? For simplicity, I am going to just do 1. Okay, but I could have had 50 here, but I am going to move above the line the projects I wish to evaluate. Can I get these done in my quarter 4, in my next year, whatever yet that planning cycle is? A couple things you see right away. The first thing I would always look at are, can I do it with the resources I have? Okay, so this is telling me with the red above the Gantt, the resources I have allocated to this project, which are mostly roles at this point. I don't have named resources, and that's typical for planning. Can I get the work done? The answer is no. I have some constraints, and if I filter down to these constraints, let me just increase this. It's the senior developers that I don't have the bandwidth for that. The reason I bring this up is that could cause a budgetary discussion of what if I have to hire for some senior developers? Can I even hire them? And at what time could I hire them? And those that are on the phone probably know this. Long-term planning is critical to have enough lead time to figure that out. So that is such an important factor, whether you're doing agile framework, whether you're doing waterfall. This is typically a question that has to answer, what are my teams that need to be in place in order to get this work done? So that's the first, and has a cost implication if I have to hire. Financially, there's a third section here. So not only do I care about the resources first, usually, because can I even tackle that with the resources I have? Can you tackle it with the financials that you have? And so if I just exit out of looking at the one project, you can see below that the financials for capitalized expenses, operational expenses, the total expenses, the total cost, and your benefits that you're trying to drive for get adjusted based on the timing of that. So if I said I really wanted to do that earlier, my total budget would not allow me to get that done. Why? What else is taking that budget? You can hover over this Instagram just like you have hovered over the resource side, and it rolls up what projects are using those funds or the funds are reserved for, and which ones are over allocated based on that. So you can see if I now move this to a later time period, 2024, or 2025 actually, and right about there, Q2, I don't have any problem. So this is, of course, the playground, right, that you're trying to balance when the funds are available in order to keep it. I mentioned you could do quarterly or annual planning cycle here. That's all about the Zoom level. So you can maintain the budgets at a quarterly level. You can then drill down to a quarter level here and be able to, I'm sorry, a month level, and be able to see your how that same project adjusted to a quarterly level. So depending on, are your funds at an annual level or a quarterly level to readjust, you would change the Zoom level. This is one way the PMO or portfolio coordinators would monitor the reality. So things are happening, changes are happening, timelines are shifting. Someone's got approval from their sponsor of changing their project budget. Yet how does it impact the portfolio is shown here of the reality of the timing of all those active projects. So that's one place. The other place you're going to use are the reports. One of the reports that is pretty common is the budget to the plan and how am I doing according to my plan. So you could drill down to project manager here, okay? You could use this at, group it by some other metadata you have, maybe by business goal, which can be pretty common. If I was looking at a value stream portfolio, I would probably want to group this by business goal and then say, how is my budget faring to that goal? The other report that is pretty typical is, projects don't stay still, right? Everything changes as soon as you say go. So as things are shuffling, the reality of when you're planning to spend that money may also shuffle. And so the forecast of those expenses or capitalized dollars can be drilled into quarter, can be drilled into a month if you wish. but it gives you a sense of what you are planning to spend quarter by quarter as the reality of schedules might shift. The other area, of course, with reporting, many customers use Power BI. This information is part of Power BI. One of the features coming is the ability to add portfolio budgets to this report. Up to now, it's been project budgets and how am I faring with project budgets. Portfolio budgets is going to be a new feature, so keep your eyes out for that for those that rely on the reporting. And portfolio dashboards, as I mentioned earlier on, it's going to be really exciting. It's going to be a new feature that aggregates a lot of this information to try and show you signs of trouble very quickly or the health of your portfolio. And that is another way you'll be able to monitor. All right. Well, that is the deep dive for today. I know it was a whirlwind. I hope you were able to discover something new. Feel free to show some hands and reactions out there, guys. At this point, I'm going to turn it over to Caroline to show you what's coming up on the roadmap. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Debbie. Let me get the PowerPoint back up for you guys. All right. Okay, so Debbie gave us such a thorough review of our financial features and the updates that we've had there. We've, of course, updated other things within Meisterplan. One of the goals that we've really been focusing on is improved functionalities across all stakeholders so that you can work together on a joint plan. So that's everyone from the portfolio coordinators, resource managers, project managers, upper management, and your employees or project teams. So we'll take a look at some of the features that have been released already that help support this goal. So first, looking at refining collaboration and increasing transparency between the PMO or portfolio coordinator and upper management. So one of the features that has come out recently is the ability to see milestones and dependencies in the roadmap. So you can see those either, there's an option where you'll be able to show all milestones and dependencies and see that across the whole roadmap, or you can focus on a single project and see the different milestones and phases of that project and any dependencies that that project has. So what this does is really gives you an overview for your management or your portfolio board with just the information that they need in the roadmap view. So the next feature that we'll highlight is our new user-defined project fields with multiple selections. So for ages, we've had the ability to have a single select option, but now you're able to choose multi-select for a field and be able to select multiple options for certain things. An example of how you may want to use this is maybe to show all regions that the project is relevant to, for example. Now, another feature that has been released already is our scenario comparison. Debbie showed you the scenario comparison in the different views. Now we have that built into our pivot reports as well, or the ability to show that. So here you can see we're comparing an approved plan with the plan of record, and you can compare key figures. You can see the differences, any deviations between the two plans. You can use that as a lesson learned versus what you planned versus what reality was, or you can also use that when you're trying to decide on a plan alternative and you need to compare two plans to decide which decision to make. And another goal of ours is to be more efficient in communicating and resolving of conflicts in resource planning. So one of our more recent updates is what we call allocation comments. And so you guys are probably familiar with project comments that we've had for a while, but how this differs is this is your dedicated space to specifically discuss role and resource allocations on a project. So for instance, this might be a place where you ask it for a specific individual that you'd like to be added to a project. Or if you notice some over allocations or some conflicts coming up, this might be a place where you discuss how you can resolve those conflicts. Okay, so then the next, oops, sorry, I forgot we had an interaction here. So this kind of just shows you how the comments work on in the allocation. So, all right, so the next one is our customizable navigation. And this is a cool feature that was released, I don't know, a few weeks ago. And what you can do here is you can decide per view which user group has access to which view. So for instance, you can basically make it so that each user has only the views that are really relevant to them. With our new My Projects view that we released earlier this year, if you want to get more of your project team members or other employees into Meisterplan, but don't want to give them access to all of the views, you can, for instance, set up a user group for those project team members where they only see their own projects in the My Projects view and are able to comment and look at their schedule and what's coming up for them, but not see other information that's not relevant to them. Okay, so now I will switch over to our product roadmap. Give me a moment. And 1 second. Let me try this again. It's not coming up. Okay, here we go. Now it's working. Okay, so now here are some upcoming features. And Debbie already gave some teasers about some of these. So the first one that we'll talk about again is the portfolio dashboard. Again, this is a place where we intend to put to have a really comprehensive view specifically for decision makers, where they can see the KPIs that are really relevant to them, really quickly see the health of the project portfolio, and be able to do that right inside Meisterplan without having to go to an external tool. The next one that Debbie also mentioned is the ability to have our portfolio budgets represented in our reporting. So that will give you insights into things like the planned budget versus project costs, and just let you be able to see things on the portfolio level and be able to make those informed decisions and really be able to make sure that you are achieving what you want to achieve. Okay, now going in a little bit different direction, away from financials again, this feature that we're working on is specifically with project managers in mind. So we have heard many times that our project managers, their view or their place in Meisterplan is often our project details, where they go in and they add status updates and add information about their project. And sometimes it's hard to remember that we need to keep an eye on the allocations as well. So here we're adding a tab in the project details area where on allocations. And they'll be able to see the allocations for their project and make some changes as needed directly there without having to jump over to the portfolio designer or any other view to do that. And then another one that I'd like to show you guys is our team member who can enter own actual time work directly in Meisterplan. So I talked about that My Projects view that's really made for all of your employees or all of your project team members who want to participate in Meisterplan. So what we'll be adding to that My Projects view is a section where they'll be able to see their planned allocations and enter their own actual time worked themselves, so that you can make sure that there's a lot of accurate information and that the details are there and they're able to support that themselves. So all of these are coming within 1 or 2 months. So around between October and November. For the portfolio dashboard, we will start with a beta. So encourage you guys to try it out and let us know what you think and give us your feedback there. So, okay, let me change what I'm sharing again. We'll go back to the PowerPoint. And okay, so what we will talk, so you've seen a lot of the features that we've had, and it's really important to us that you guys that are aware of what features are coming, and what we're planning and what has been released. So there's some things that we've worked on really around our communication. So of course we've had these webinars for, I think, the last 3 quarters in 2023. And that's one way to keep you guys apprised of what's going on. Something that's pretty exciting to me, you guys probably are familiar with the pop-ups that will show what has recently been released. I know there's some fallbacks of that. Usually when you open Meisterplan, you're not opening it necessarily to find out about a new feature that's been released. You probably are intending to do something, to work on something in Meisterplan. So instead of those release pop-ups, we now will have, or coming soon, there will be a little megaphone icon that'll be up in the header, and you can click that, and then you can get a list of the recent releases. And you can do that as soon as you get into Meisterplan, or you can do your thing, do what you needed to do, and then when you have some time, you can go back and you can close it and go back. It doesn't disappear like the old release pop-ups did. So this will be a way to keep up. And if you need to be reminded, like, oh, what was that new feature? I wanted to try that out. You can go here and find out about it. Again, I showed you some of those cards that I showed you were from what we call our product roadmap. And that is a place that I highly encourage you guys to get familiar with. It's where you can vote on new features. You can give your feedback. You can give your use cases for specific features that we're working on. And it's just a really great place for it. We, as a product management and product marketing team, we also let you know what we're planning, but getting your feedback on that as we're developing things is just extremely important. And last but not least, in addition to our normal Meisterplan YouTube channel, we have a new channel that's dedicated to feature releases. So you can go check out and subscribe to that YouTube channel, and on a monthly basis, you can find out different new things in a quick, they're not long videos, 2 to 4 minutes, probably something like that, and find out what's going on, what has been released. So that is our product roadmap. And now we will switch over to our Q&A session. Again, if you guys have comments, or excuse me, questions, you can raise your hand and we'll unmute you and you can ask the question. You can also submit them in the questions panel. We do have a couple of questions that came in before we started or at registration. So we'll start with one of those. And Debbie, if you're ready, I think this first question.
I suppose you want me on.
I would love for you to answer some of these questions. That would be awesome. So the first question is, the person said, I would like to know if there's an alternative to the OPEX CAPEX approach to managing project budgets.
So yeah, maybe. So the alternative, I would say, is at the total budget level. Let me just share my screen. Maybe I may not be understanding their question, but I will try. So, all right, cool. So in the projects, the one area is you don't need to get down to CapEx and OpEx. Those two are optional, and you could also just hide them from anybody to see them. You could just use approved budget, which is just one number, and that would then traditionally be because you only have operational expenses. And in that case, use financial tracker to monitor it. You don't need cost type tracker. The other thing I see often is I don't really have dollars I'm trying to manage. It's a lot of people's time. And so while this might not be classified as a budget necessarily, I have encouraged customers to use this as a way to baseline the project's time early on after you have done your initial refinement and you have figured out, boy, it really looks like it's going to be 1,800 days. How do you know that? You would know that by looking at the resource and cost allocations. They get rolled up for you. You probably have a risk register that indicates you have some risk still that could happen, so you could increase that by your risk. That gives you then allocation tracker to monitor the time, what I'll call time budget. And then you can also use those for your project list screen. So I don't know if I've totally landed that. Feel free to send over another question if I didn't understand the question.
Thank you, Debbie. Okay, so a couple more questions. The next one is, how about financial portfolio budgeting for value streams or participatory budgeting?
I'll answer okay, so value stream budgets, let's go back to the portfolio view. Again, this is new, so might be confusing. If I am doing a value stream of, order through cash or something, HR, whatever, I'm probably having a field that is driven for that value stream. So employee lifecycle, order to cash, and projects or ideas that are coming in are flagged to that value stream. So it works the same as a department budget. You have to filter what is the projects that relate to this value stream. You then can add this is kind of new with Excel-like editing as well. You can just type in your amounts here by quarter, by month, or by year. And then when you are in Portfolio Designer, that value stream would be shown up here with the budgets that you've assigned and the projects that belong to it.
Excellent. I don't see any hands raised right now, so I'll go to the next question that was asked previously. When will we have the feature that allows us to enter actual FTEs for each project? And can we automate a form to send out? So I can answer that. So that's there's two features that are coming that are applicable to this. So the first one is allowing in the My Projects view, the project team member to be able to enter their own actual time worked. And the way that you can easily send that out to them is just copying that URL for that view and sending it over to them. And then they'll be able to go in there and enter that information. Similarly, shortly after, so that should come in about October, in a few weeks. A little bit after that, some weeks, probably November-ish sometime, we'll also offer that ability for project managers. So there will be the area for project managers to be able to go in and enter actual time worked for the project, for their own projects as well. So those are coming soon. Okay, it doesn't look like we have any more questions unless you see something I don't, Debbie.
I don't see any. There is, just for those that are on, a question box at the top with a question mark. So if you do have a question, feel free. We have time to answer more.
Okay, so either raise your hand or ask a question if you have anything. If not,
we got one.
We got one. Okay,
Don't rush
awesome.
off. We got one. Okay.
Sorry.
Is there the ability to add different budget types that aren't CapEx or OpEx? can you give me an example? What wouldn't it be, CapEx or OpEx? And as you're doing that, let me show you that capitalized types or operational types or benefits are the three that yet you cannot change. You can change financial categories that relate to the type of work that can be capitalized or can be an operational expense. So you can, for example, put in server infrastructure here. The back end name ID is what's used for reporting, so the front end name is what you'll see. That way, when you're over in project list and you're getting into one of these, you can now add operational and see that server here and say how much is that server cost happening. We have some different client funded changes that would be useful to track. We could, we'll talk offline and get your further requirements if you don't mind. Thank you for sending that over though.
Absolutely. All right. Any other questions? It looks like going once, going twice. Okay. All right. Well, thank you all so very much for participating. If you want to scan this QR code, and I think Debbie, maybe did you also leave a link, or Dorina, maybe in the chat for the survey. Oops, we did get another question in though. But it's for
No, just
after
talking
after the
offline.
webinar. Okay, we're all good. So yeah, you guys give us your feedback on the webinar. We'd love to hear from you guys and know what we can do even better next time. And really appreciate all of your participation.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you so much, and have a great evening or day.